When Clara loses her job, a stranger's quiet kindness on her morning bus becomes the start of something bigger. But Luca hides a secret that could upend everything. Can love survive a lie this big? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The 6:42 bus made its usual stops through downtown as rain pattered against the windows. Clara Menezes huddled in her seat near the back, clutching her worn tote bag against her chest. Her dark hair fell forward, hiding the tears streaming down her face. She'd spent 3 years at Patterson Publishing, working overtime, sacrificing weekends, and today they'd let her go without even a warning. Budget cuts, her boss had said, not even looking her in the eye. Nothing personal, but it felt personal. It felt like the universe telling her once again that dreams were for other people, not for girls who grew up in dingy apartments, with fathers who disappeared and mothers who worked 2 jobs. Clara tried to muffle a sob with her hand, but it escaped. Anyway, she quickly wiped her eyes with her sleeve, hoping no one noticed. The last thing she needed was strangers staring at her. Here. She turned to find a tissue being offered by the man who had just sat down beside her. He wore a simple navy blue hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. His face was kind, with the beginnings of a beard and eyes that seemed hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if he should have spoken at all. "Thanks," Clara mumbled, taking the tissue. "Bad day?" he asked, his voice soft, barely audible over the rumble of the bus engine. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying again. "I've had those too," he said. Then he fell silent, staring ahead at nothing in particular. There was something calming about his presence. He didn't ask nosy questions or offer empty platitudes. He just sat there, a quiet companion in her moment of despair. "I just lost my job," Clara said finally, surprising herself with the confession. "I'm sorry," he replied. "That's rough." 3 years, she continued. 3 years of giving everything and they just... Her voice broke. "Companies can be heartless," he said, and there was a bitter edge to his words, as if he knew this truth all too well. The bus jerked to a halt at the next stop and more passengers crowded on. The man shifted closer to make room, and Clara caught a faint whiff of his cologne, something expensive that didn't match his casual clothes. "I'm Luca," he said. "Clara." "Nice to meet you, Clara, though I wish it were under better circumstances." She managed a weak smile. "Yeah, me too." When her stop came, Clara stood up, steadying herself on the handrail. "This is me," she said, though she wasn't sure why she felt the need to tell him. Luca nodded. "Take care, Clara." "You too," she replied, stepping off the bus into the rain, wondering why a simple interaction with a stranger had made her feel just a tiny bit better. The next morning, Clara sat at her small kitchen table, laptop open to job listings. Her 1-bedroom apartment felt especially small today, closing in on her with its peeling paint and leaky faucet. The phone rang, interrupting her search. "Hey, Marco," she answered, recognizing her younger brother's number. "Clara, how's my favorite sister?" His voice was too cheerful, which usually meant trouble. "I'm your only sister," she replied, already suspicious. "What's wrong? Do you need money again?" There was a pause. "My tuition payment is due next week." Clara closed her eyes. Marco was in his 2nd year of college, struggling to balance classes and a part-time job. She'd been helping him financially since their mother died 2 years ago. "Marco, I lost my job yesterday." "What? Why?" "Budget cuts. They let go of 3 people." "Oh man, I'm sorry." His voice softened. "Don't worry about the tuition. I'll figure something out." No, I'll help. I've got some savings." The words came out automatically. "Big sister to the rescue, as always. Are you sure? What about your rent?" "I'll be fine," she lied. "I'll find another job soon. How's school?" They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Clara stared at her bank account on the screen, the numbers looking smaller than ever. She had enough for 1 month's rent and maybe half of Marco's tuition payment. After that, she shook her head. She couldn't think that far ahead right now. One day at a time. 3 days later, Clara was back on the 6:42 bus, heading downtown for a job interview at a small marketing firm. She wore her best blazer, which was starting to show wear at the elbows, and clutched a folder with copies of her resume. She was so focused on mentally rehearsing interview answers that she didn't notice Luca until he sat down beside her. "Clara," he said with a smile of recognition. She blinked in surprise. "Luca, hi." "You look better today," he observed. "Job interview," she explained, gesturing to her outfit. "Good luck. They'd be lucky to have you." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know what I do." "True," he admitted. "What do you do?" "Editorial assistant. Or I was anyway. At Patterson Publishing." His eyes lit up. "Books? You work with books?" Clara nodded, surprised by his enthusiasm. "Yeah, mostly fiction. I read manuscripts, write reports on them, help with editing." "That sounds amazing," Luca said, and he seemed genuinely impressed. "I've always loved books. What's your favorite?" The question caught her off guard. Most people in her life didn't ask about books. They asked about rent payments and job prospects. "That's like asking someone to pick a favorite star," she said. "Impossible." Luca laughed, a warm sound that made her smile despite her nerves about the interview. "Fair enough. What about recent reads, then?" Before she knew it, they were deep in conversation about novels and authors. Luca was knowledgeable and passionate about literature, naming obscure writers she'd only discovered through her work. For a moment, Clara forgot about her problems, lost in a discussion about character development and plot structure. When her stop came, she was almost reluctant to leave. "Good luck today," Luca said as she stood up. "I know you'll be great." "Thanks," Clara replied, feeling strangely bolstered by his confidence. As the bus pulled away, she realized she hadn't asked him anything about himself. She didn't know what he did or where he was going each morning. He was still a mystery. The man on the 642. The interview went poorly. The position required experience with digital marketing that Clara didn't have. She could tell 10 minutes in that she wouldn't get the job, but she smiled through the rest of the questions anyway. Afterward, she wandered through a small park, too dejected to go straight home. The spring day was cool but sunny, and Clara found an empty bench where she could sit and think. Her phone chimed with a text from Marco. "How did the interview go?" "Not great," she typed back. "Wrong fit." "Don't worry, sis, the right job is out there." Clara smiled at her brother's optimism. If only she could believe it too. She was about to put her phone away when she noticed a man sitting on a bench across the path, reading a book. It took her a moment to recognize Luca without his hoodie. Today he wore a simple button-down shirt that looked expensive, even from a distance. Clara hesitated, then stood up and walked over. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. Luca looked up, surprise, giving way to a smile. "Clara, no, please sit down." She settled beside him. "What are you reading?" He showed her the cover. It was a novel she'd edited at Patterson. "No way," she said. "I worked on that book." "Really?" Luca looked impressed. "It's brilliant. The way the author handles the relationship between the brothers." He trailed off. "Sorry, I get carried away talking about books." "Don't apologize, it's nice." Clara smiled. "Most people I know think reading is a waste of time." "Those people are missing out," Luca said firmly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Clara's curiosity got the better of her. "So, what do you do for work, I mean?" A shadow passed over Luca's face. "I'm between things right now." "Join the club," Clara said with a dry laugh. "The job interview didn't go well." She sighed. "They were looking for someone with digital marketing experience. I've been in traditional publishing for 3 years." "Their loss," Luca said. Then, hesitantly, Would you want to get coffee? There's a nice place just around the corner." Clara studied him. Under different circumstances, she might have said yes immediately. Luca was attractive, kind, and they shared a love of books. But right now her life was falling apart, and starting something with someone, even just a friendship, seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. "I should probably get home," she said reluctantly. "Keep looking for jobs." "Of course." Luca nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "Another time, maybe." "Maybe," Clara agreed, standing up. She paused, then added, "I take the 642 most mornings." Luca smiled. "So do I. Over the next 2 weeks, the 6:42 bus became the brightest part of Clara's day. Luca was always there, saving her a seat, ready to discuss books or listen to her vent about failed interviews. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, content with their brief conversations during the morning commute. Clara learned that Luca had studied literature in college before family obligations pulled him in another direction. He was vague about what those obligations were, and Clara didn't press. Everyone had parts of their lives they preferred not to talk about. Meanwhile, Clara's situation grew more desperate. Her savings were dwindling, and Marco's tuition deadline was approaching. She had taken a part-time job at a coffee shop, but it wasn't enough to cover both expenses. One morning, Clara boarded the bus looking particularly tired. She had been up late applying for jobs after an 8-hour shift making lattes. "You okay?" Luca asked as she slumped into the seat beside him. "Just tired," she said. "Long night." Luca hesitated, then said, "Clara, I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but have you considered tutoring? With your background in literature and editing, you could help students with essays or adults looking to improve their writing." Clara sat up straighter. "I hadn't thought of that." "You'd be great at it," Luca continued, "and you could set your own rates, work around your coffee shop schedule. That's actually a really good idea." Clara felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "Thanks, Luca," he smiled, clearly pleased that he'd helped. "You know, if you wanted to get started, I could use some help myself." Clara looked at him skeptically. "You? You probably know more about literature than I do." "Not with writing. I'm working on something, and I could use an editor's eye." He seemed almost shy about the admission. "I'd pay your regular rates of course, you're writing a book." Luca shrugged. "Trying to. It's probably terrible." "I doubt that," Clara said, genuinely curious. "What's it about?" "A man who inherits something he never wanted and loses himself in the process." Luca's eyes met hers. "It's about finding your way back to who you really are." Something in his gaze made Clara's heart beat faster. There was a depth to Luca she was only beginning to understand, layers beneath his quiet exterior. "I'd love to." "Read it," she said softly. The bus pulled to a stop, Clara's stop. She stood up reluctantly. "Same time tomorrow?" Luca asked. Clara nodded. "It's a date." Then, realizing what she'd said, she blushed. I know what you mean," Luca said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "See you tomorrow, Clara." As she stepped off the bus, Clara couldn't help but smile. For the first time since losing her job, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. What she didn't know was that Luca Vidal wasn't just any struggling writer, and the truth about who he really was would soon change everything between them. That evening, while Clara set up a simple website advertising her tutoring services, a sleek black car pulled up outside a towering glass building in the financial district. Luca stepped out, his hoodie and jeans replaced by an impeccably tailored suit. "Good evening, Mr. Vidal," the security guard greeted him as he entered the lobby. "Evening, Joe," Luca replied, heading for the private elevator. The doors opened directly into a massive penthouse office overlooking the city. A woman in a sharp business suit looked up from her desk. "There you are," she said with obvious relief. "The board members have been calling all day. They need you to sign off on the Rivera development before Friday." Luca loosened his tie. "I told you, Elena, I'm not making any decisions until I've reviewed all the displacement reports. But the investors can wait." Luca's voice hardened. "I'm not forcing 200 families out of their homes just to build another luxury high-rise." Helena sighed. "Your father would have signed the papers weeks ago." "Well, I'm not my father," Luca said quietly, "and maybe that's a good thing." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there was a small apartment where Clara was struggling to make ends meet, unaware that the man she met on the bus each morning controlled one of the largest real estate empires in the city. Luca had been riding the bus for months now, trying to reconnect with the real world after years of isolation in the bubble of wealth and privilege. He'd never expected to find someone like Clara, someone genuine, passionate, and completely unimpressed by the trappings of success. For the first time since inheriting his father's company, Luca felt like himself again. Not the reluctant CEO, not the billionaire heir, but just Luca, the man who loved books and quiet conversations on the 642 bus. But how long could he keep his two worlds separate? And what would happen when Clara discovered the truth? Clara's tutoring business began slowly. She created flyers and posted them at the local college and coffee shops. Within a week, she had 3 clients, 2 college students struggling with English essays and a middle-aged woman writing her first novel. But her most consistent client was Luca. True to his word, he had emailed her pages from his manuscript, and they had begun meeting at a small cafe after Clara's coffee shop shifts to discuss his writing. "This is really good," Clara told him one evening, sliding his pages across the table. "Your dialogue especially. It feels natural, not forced." Luca looked pleased but skeptical. "You're not just saying that because I'm paying you?" Clara laughed. "I spent 3 years telling authors their babies were ugly. Trust me, I'd tell you if this was bad." "Thanks," Luca said, genuinely touched. "It means a lot coming from you." There was something in his voice that made Clara look up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Clara felt a familiar flutter in her chest that both excited and terrified her. The moment was broken by Clara's phone ringing. She checked the screen. "Marco again." "I should take this," she said, standing up. "It's my brother." Luca nodded. "Of course." Clara stepped outside the cafe. "Marco, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Marco replied, though his voice was tight with tension. "Just checking in. How's the tutoring going?" "It's going well. I've got a few clients." Clara leaned against the brick wall of the cafe. "Did you figure out your tuition situation?" There was a pause. "Sort of. I took out a private loan." Clara's stomach dropped. "What?" "Marco, those interest rates are predatory." "I didn't have a choice, Clara. The deadline was today and I knew you didn't have the money." His voice softened. "I couldn't ask you for more. You're already working 2 jobs." Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of failure pressed down on her shoulders. She'd always taken care of Marco, especially after their mother died. Now, when he needed her most, she couldn't help. "How much did you borrow?" she asked quietly. Marco told her, and Clara felt sick. The amount would take years to pay off at those interest rates. "I'll figure something out," she promised. "Don't worry." When she returned to the table, Luca immediately sensed her distress. "Everything okay?" Clara shook her head. "My brother." She hesitated, not wanting to burden Luca with her problems, but something in his concerned expression made her continue. "He took out a predatory loan for his tuition. I was supposed to help him, but with losing my job," she trailed off, embarrassed by the tears threatening to spill over. Luca reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, comforting. "I'm sorry, Clara. That's really tough." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "How much does he need?" Luca asked gently. Clara wiped her eyes. "It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out somehow." "What if—" Luca seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "What if I could help?" Clara stiffened and pulled her hand away. "I don't need charity, Luca." "It's not charity," he said quickly. I have some connections. Maybe I could help find your brother a better loan or a scholarship opportunity." Clara studied his face, surprised by the intensity in his eyes. "Why would you do that? You barely know us." Luca looked down at his coffee cup. "Maybe I want to—" "No, you better." The simple honesty of his words caught Clara off guard. In the weeks since they'd met on the bus, Luca had become important to her in ways she hadn't expected. His quiet strength, his passion for books, the way he listened, like every word she said mattered. "I'd like that too," she admitted softly. When they left the cafe that night, Luca walked her to her bus stop. Before she boarded, he gently touched her arm. "Clara, can I take you to dinner tomorrow night? A real dinner, not just coffee after your shift." Her heart raced. "Like a date?" "Exactly like a date," Luca said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Clara hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." "Great." Luca's smile widened. "I'll pick you up at 7. As the bus pulled away, Clara watched him through the window, a strange mixture of excitement and unease stirring within her. There was something about Luca she couldn't quite figure out, a mystery beneath his simple appearance. But then again, everyone had secrets, including her. The next evening, Clara stood in front of her closet, surveying her limited options. Most of her nicer clothes had been sold months ago to help pay for Marco's books. She finally settled on a simple blue dress she'd kept for job interviews. It wasn't fancy, but it was the best she had. As she applied a touch of mascara, her only. Makeup. Clara tried to quiet the voice in her head telling her this was a mistake. Getting involved with someone now, when her life was such a mess, seemed foolish. And yet, she couldn't deny the way her heart lifted whenever Luca was near. At exactly 7, there was a knock at her door. Clara took a deep breath and opened it. Luca stood there in dark jeans and a grey button-down shirt that brought out the blue in his eyes. He looked impossibly handsome, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "They're beautiful," Clara replied, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gesture. "Come in while I put them in water." She was acutely aware of Luca taking in her small apartment as she found a jar for the flowers. The space was neat but worn, second-hand furniture, patched curtains, walls that needed painting. There was nothing to hide the fact that she was barely getting by. But Luca didn't seem to notice or care about the shabbiness. Instead, he moved to her bookshelf, examining the titles with interest. "Your collection is impressive," he said, running his fingers along the spines. "Most of them are from library sales," Clara explained. $1 each. Luca pulled out a dog-eared copy of East of Eden. "This is one of my favorites." "Mine too," Clara said, surprised by yet another connection between them. As she grabbed her purse, Clara noticed Luca glancing at a framed photo on her desk. Clara and Marco with their mother, taken shortly before her death. "My family," she explained. "My brother Marco and my mom. That was about 3 years ago." "You look like her," Luca said softly. Clara nodded, feeling the familiar ache. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry." Luca's voice was gentle. "My mom died when I was 16. Car accident." Clara looked at him with new understanding. "It changes you, doesn't it? Losing a parent." "It does." Luca's eyes met hers, and in that moment, a deeper connection formed between them. The unspoken bond of shared grief. "Ready to go?" he asked after a moment. Clara nodded and they headed out. She expected him to lead her to a bus stop, but instead, they walked to a modestly priced restaurant just a few blocks away. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and cozy, with small tables and warm lighting. "I hope this is okay," Luca said as they were seated. "The food here is amazing." "It's perfect," Clara assured him, relieved he hadn't chosen somewhere extravagant. Over dinner, their conversation flowed easily. Luca told her about growing up as the son of a demanding father, about his college years studying literature before reality intervened. "What does that mean?" Clara asked. "Reality intervened?" Luca looked uncomfortable. "Family obligations. My father needed help with his business, and I was expected to step in." "Do you still work with him?" "He passed away 3 years ago," Luca said, a complex emotion crossing his face. "Heart attack." "I'm sorry," Clara said, noticing how Luca didn't seem entirely grief-stricken at the memory. "Were you close?" Luca shook his head. "Not really. My father was difficult. Everything was about business, success, appearances. After my mother died, he threw himself into work and expected me to do the same." "So what happened to the business?" Clara asked. Luca took a sip of water, avoiding her eyes. "It's still in the family." Before she could ask more questions, he changed the subject. "Tell me about your dreams, Clara. Before life got complicated, what did you want to be?" The question caught her off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked about her dreams. "A writer," she admitted. "I always wanted to write my own stories, not just edit other people's. I have notebooks full of ideas, characters, beginnings that never got finished." "Why didn't you pursue it?" Clara shrugged. "Life. Responsibility. After Mom got sick, there was no time for dreams. It was all about survival. And now? Now, Clara gave a dry laugh. Now it's still about survival. Luca reached across the table and took her hand. Dreams matter, Clara. They're not luxuries. They're necessities. The conviction in his voice stirred something in her. A long-dormant hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be more to her life than just getting by. After dinner, they walked slowly back to her apartment, shoulders touching occasionally, hands brushing against each other, until Luca finally took hers in his. At her door they paused, both reluctant for the evening to end. "I had a wonderful time," Clara said. "So did I." Luca's eyes searched her face. "Clara, Before he could finish, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Luca pulled her closer. One, hand cradling the back of her head. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the day you gave me that tissue on the bus," Clara admitted with a shy smile. Luca laughed softly. "Not my smoothest move." "It worked, didn't it?" He kissed her again, briefly this time. "I should go, but I'll see you tomorrow on the 6:42, Clara nodded. "I'll be there." As she closed the door behind him, Clara leaned against it, her heart still racing. For the first time in years, she felt something beyond worry and responsibility. She felt hope. The next morning, Clara hurried to the bus stop, eager to see Luca again. But as the 6:42 pulled up, she didn't see him in his usual spot. She boarded anyway, scanning the seats, but Luca wasn't there. Disappointed, she took their regular seat, wondering what had happened. Maybe he'd overslept or had to take an earlier bus for some reason. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Sorry I missed the bus, something came up at work, see you later. Luca." Clara smiled with relief and texted back, "Of course, hope everything's okay." As the bus continued its route, Clara gazed out the window, replaying their kiss in her mind. She was so distracted she almost missed it when the bus passed a massive construction site downtown. A huge billboard displayed the project's name. Vidal Towers, luxury living in the heart of the city. Clara frowned, the name triggering something in her memory. Vidal. Where had she heard that name recently? Her phone buzzed again with another text from Luca, and suddenly the connection clicked. Luca Vidal. It couldn't be. Clara quickly pulled up a web browser on her phone and searched Luca Vidal. The results loaded, and Clara's blood ran cold. There he was, her Luca, dressed in an expensive suit, standing next to a distinguished older man. The caption read, "Roberto Vidal and son Luca at the opening of Vidal Plaza 2019. She scrolled through more results, each one confirming what she was beginning to realize. Luca Vidal wasn't just any man who rode the 6:42 bus. He was the heir to Vidal Enterprises, one of the largest real estate development companies in the city. According to the articles, he had inherited the company after his father's death 3 years ago. Luca was a billionaire, and he had never told her. Clara felt sick, betrayed. All those conversations about struggling with writing, about understanding her financial problems, had it all been an act? Some kind of game to him? The memory of their kiss, so sweet just moments ago, now felt tainted by deception. When she arrived at work, Clara's hands were shaking as she tied on her apron. Throughout her shift, she kept checking her phone, seeing more messages from Luca, asking if they could meet after work. She didn't respond. That evening, Clara sat in her apartment, surrounded by the flowers Luca had given her, feeling like a fool. A knock at the door startled her. She knew who it was before she opened it. Luca stood there, concern etched on his face. "Clara, are you okay? You didn't answer my texts." She crossed her arms. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" The color drained from his face. "What do you mean?" "Don't," Clara snapped. "Don't insult my intelligence. Luca Vidal, heir to Vidal Enterprises, billionaire developer. Ring any bells?" Luca closed his eyes briefly. "Clara, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you lied to me? That you pretended to understand my struggles when you've probably never struggled a day in your life?" "That's not fair," Luca said, his voice tight. "You don't know anything about my life." "And whose fault is that?" Clara shot back. You had plenty of opportunities to tell me the truth. If I had told you who I was from the beginning, would you have given me a chance? Or would you have seen only the money, the name, like everyone else does? His words gave her pause. There was real pain in his eyes, not the calculated manipulation she had imagined. I don't know, she admitted finally, but I deserved the choice. Luca nodded slowly. You're right, I should have told you sooner. I liked being just Luca with you. Not Luca Vidal, not the CEO, not the heir, just a guy on the 642 bus who loves books and, he hesitated, and who's falling for the most real person he's met in years. Clara's heart twisted painfully. Why the bus, Luca? Was it all some kind of social experiment? Slumming with the common folk? No, he said firmly. After my father died, I inherited everything. The company, the responsibility, the lifestyle. But it felt empty, Clara. For 3 years, I lived in a bubble of wealth and privilege, surrounded by people who only saw the Vidal name. I started riding the bus because I needed to remember what real life was like, what real people were like. He took a step closer. And then I met you. The sincerity in his voice made Clara's anger waver, but she held her ground. How can I trust you now? How do I know any of this is real? Because I'm telling you the whole truth now, Luca said. Yes, I have money. Yes, I run a company I never wanted to run. But everything else, everything between us, that's real. Clara, more real than anything in my life has been for a long time. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to fall back into the comfort of his arms, to believe that their connection transcended the vast gulf between their circumstances. But the voice in her head, the one that had protected her through years of disappointment, warned her to be careful. I need time, she said finally, to think about all this. Luca nodded, respecting her boundary, though it clearly pained him. I understand, but Clara, please believe one thing. I never meant to hurt you. Everything I feel for you is genuine. After he left, Clara sank onto her sofa, emotionally exhausted. The image of Luca, not the simple, thoughtful man she'd fallen for, but the wealthy heir to a real estate empire, kept swimming before her eyes. How could she reconcile these two versions of the same man? And more importantly, could she ever trust him again? Across town, Luca entered his penthouse apartment, loosening his tie with agitation. His assistant Elena looked up from her laptop. The board members are asking about your decision on the Rivera project, she said by way of greeting. Not now, Elena, Luca snapped, uncharacteristically harsh. Elena raised an eyebrow. Bad day, Luca sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, yes, it's been complicated. Does this have something to do with why you're never around in the mornings anymore? Elena asked shrewdly. Or why you've been leaving early? Every evening. Maybe, Luca admitted, pouring himself a glass of water. Luca, Eleanor's voice softened. She'd been his father's assistant for 20 years and had known Luca since he was a child. What's going on? I met someone, he said simply. That's wonderful, Elena smiled. Who is she? Someone from the Newfield charity gala? Luca shook his head. She works at a coffee shop and tutors on the side. I met her on the bus. Elena's smile faltered. The bus? You mean that ridiculous habit you picked up after your father died? Luca, you can't seriously Don't, Luca interrupted, his voice hard. Don't talk about her like that. Clara is the most genuine, hard-working, honest person I've met in years. I'm sure she is, Elena said carefully. But Luca, your worlds are completely different. What happens when she finds out who you really are? She already has, Luca said quietly. And she thinks I lied to her. Didn't you? By omission, at least. Luca couldn't deny it. I just wanted her to see me, Elena. Not the Vidal name or fortune. Elena sighed. Oh, Luca, you've always been an idealist, just like your mother. She closed her laptop. So what are you going to do now? Luca looked out at the city skyline, thinking of Clara in her small apartment with her books and dreams. I don't know, he admitted. But I can't lose her, Elena. For the first time since Mom died, I feel like myself again when I'm with her. Elena studied him thoughtfully. Then you need to show her who you really are. All of you. Not just the parts. You think she wants to see Luca nodded, an idea forming in his mind. "You're right. And I know exactly how to do it." The next morning, Clara debated whether to take her usual bus. Part of her wanted to avoid seeing Luca, to give herself more time to process her feelings. But another part, the part that had been drawn to him from the beginning, needed to see him again. In the end, she decided to take her usual route. If Luca was there, they would talk. If not, she would take it as a sign that whatever had been growing between them wasn't meant to be. As the 6:42 bus pulled up, Clara took a deep breath and boarded. Her eyes immediately scanned for Luca, but he wasn't in their usual spot. Both disappointed and relieved, she made her way to an empty seat. Just as the bus began to move, a familiar figure rushed on board. Luca, slightly out of breath, spotted her and made his way down the aisle. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, echoing her words from their meeting in the park. Clara hesitated, then nodded slightly. Luca sat down beside her, careful to maintain some distance between them. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," she said after a moment. "I told you I'd take the 6:42, Luca replied. "That wasn't a lie." Clara stared out the window. "Why, though? You could have a private driver, a fancy car." "I could," Luca agreed. "But then, I wouldn't have met you." Despite herself, Clara felt a smile tug at her lips. "That's a pretty smooth line." "It's the truth," Luca said simply. Then, more seriously, "Clara, I'd like to show you something today, if you'll let me." Clara turned to look at him. "What?" "My world," Luca said. "The real one, not just what you've read about online. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Just me showing you who I really am." Clara studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was vulnerability and hope. "Okay," she said finally. "Show me." The relief on Luca's face was palpable. As the bus continued its route through the city, they sat in silence, both aware that whatever happened next would either bring them closer together or tear them apart for good. When the bus reached downtown, Luca stood up. "This is our stop." Clara hesitated, then followed him off the bus. They were in the financial district, surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers and well-dressed professionals hurrying to work. "Where are we going?" she asked, as Luca led her toward one of the tallest buildings. "My office," he replied simply. As they approached the imposing glass tower, Clara noticed the name emblazoned above the entrance, Vidal Enterprises. Her stomach tightened with anxiety. The security guard nodded respectfully as they entered. "Good morning, Mr. Vidal." "Morning, Joe," Luca replied, guiding Clara toward a private elevator at the back of the lobby. Inside the elevator, Luca swiped a key card and pressed the button for the top floor. Clara stood stiffly beside him, feeling increasingly out of place in her simple work clothes. "It's only a building, Clara," Luca said softly, noticing her discomfort. "Easy for you to say," she muttered. The elevator doors opened directly into a vast modern office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city. A sleek reception desk stood empty. It was still early, but a middle-aged woman in an elegant business suit emerged from an inner office. "Luca, there you are," she said, then stopped short at the sight of Clara. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Eleanor, this is Clara Menezes," Luca said. "Clara, this is Eleanor Winters, my father's former assistant, and now mine, though assistant doesn't begin to cover everything she does." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Clara, it's nice to meet you." Clara nodded, awkwardly. "You too." "Elena, could you reschedule my morning meetings?" Luca asked. "I'm giving Clara a tour." "Of course," Elena replied, her professional demeanor masking whatever she might be thinking. Luca led Clara through the main office area, past rows of empty desks that would soon be filled with employees. "My father built this company from nothing," he explained. "Started with one small apartment building and kept expanding. By the time he died, Vidal Enterprises owned over 50 properties across the city." They reached a large corner office with Luca Vidal, CEO, on the door. Inside, the space was surprisingly sparse. A modern desk, a few chairs, and not much else. The only personal touches were several framed photos and a bookshelf filled with literature, not business books. Clara moved to examine the photos. One showed a much younger Luca with a smiling woman who had his same blue eyes, his mother, she guessed. Another showed Luca and an older man, presumably his father, standing stiffly at what looked like a building opening. Not exactly cozy, Luca said, watching her take in the office. It's... Clara searched for words. Very CEO-like, Luca laughed, without humor. I hate it. I spend as little time here as possible. Clara turned to face him. Why show me this? Because it's part of who I am, Luca said. Even the parts I don't particularly like. He moved to the window. From up here, the city looks perfect, doesn't it? All shiny and successful. But it's so far removed from how most people actually live. He turned back to her. That's why I started riding the bus. I needed to see the real city, not just this sanitized version from 30 stories up. Clara joined him at the window. From this height, she could see her neighborhood in the distance, so small it looked insignificant. So what exactly do you do here? She asked. Officially, I run the company, make investment decisions, approve new developments, that sort of thing. And unofficially, Luca's face softened. I try to make my father's company into something better than it was. He only cared about profits. I'm trying to focus more on community. Development, affordable housing? Is that working out for you? It's complicated, Luca admitted. The board isn't always supportive of my vision. My father left a powerful legacy, and not everyone wants to see it change. Clara studied him, trying to reconcile this corporate executive with the man who had offered her a tissue on the bus. So this is the real Luca Vidal. Part of me, Luca said, but not the part that matters most. He checked his watch. Come on, there's more I want to show you. They took the elevator back down and walked a few blocks to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. A driver stood beside it. Morning, David, Luca greeted him. Mr. Vidal. The driver nodded, opening the door for them. Clara hesitated before getting in. The luxury car with its leather seats and privacy partition was so far removed from her daily bus commute. As they drove through the city, Luca pointed out various Vidal properties. Some were luxury high-rises, others were office buildings or retail spaces. Clara listened silently, trying to process the scale of wealth and power that Luca inhabited. Where are we going now? She asked as they left the downtown area. My favorite project, Luca replied. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a construction site in a working-class neighborhood. Unlike the gleaming towers downtown, this was a modest development of what looked like townhouses. Luca led Clara through the site, greeting construction workers by name as they passed. They reached a trailer that served as the site office, where blueprints were spread across a table. This is Rivera Commons, Luca explained, showing her the plans. 40 units of mixed-income housing, some market rate, some subsidized for lower income. Families. Clara looked up in surprise. This doesn't seem like a typical Vidal development. It's not, Luca agreed. My father would have hated it. The profit margins are thin and it's not prestigious enough, but it's the kind of project I want to focus on, creating homes people can actually afford in neighborhoods where they already live. Is that why you mentioned the Rivera development to Elena yesterday? Clara asked, recalling the conversation she'd overheard. Luca looked startled. You heard that? Clara nodded. I was leaving when your assistant mentioned something about board members wanting you to sign off on it. That's a different Rivera project, Luca explained. A luxury development my father had planned. The board wants to move forward with it, but it would mean displacing hundreds of families. I've been fighting it. For the first time that morning, Clara felt her anger toward Luca begin to soften. This wasn't the callous billionaire she had imagined after discovering his identity. There was genuine care in the way he spoke about the families who would benefit from this project. This matters to you, she observed. It does, Luca said. After my mother died, my father became obsessed with building his empire. He forgot that buildings aren't just properties or investments. They're people's homes. I don't want to be like him, Clara. I want to build something that actually helps people. As they walked back to the car, Clara found herself seeing Luca in a new light. He hadn't been completely honest with her, but the values he had expressed during their conversations, his concern for others, his desire for authenticity, seemed genuine. Their next stop was a small cafe in a neighborhood Clara didn't recognize. It was a modest place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. "I found this place about a year ago," Luca explained as they sat down. "Best coffee in the city, and the owner, Maria, uses her profits to fund art programs for neighborhood kids." On cue, an older woman with silver-streaked hair approached their table. "Luca, I haven't seen you in weeks." "Been busy, Maria," Luca replied, standing to accept her warm hug. "This is Clara." "Ah, so this is Clara," Maria said with a knowing smile. "Luca has mentioned you." Clara raised an eyebrow at Luca, who looked slightly embarrassed. "Maria's like my unofficial therapist," he explained after the woman had gone to get their coffee. "I've spent a lot of mornings here, trying to figure out what to do with my father's legacy." "And have you figured it out?" Clara asked. Luca shook his head. "Not entirely, but meeting you as it's made some things clearer." Their coffee arrived, and for a while they sat in companionable silence. Clara's mind was racing, trying to process everything she had learned about Luca that morning. "Why did you keep it all a secret?" she asked finally. "Did you think I would only be interested in your money?" "No," Luca said quickly. "It wasn't about you, Clara. It was about me." He sighed. "After my father died, I became Luca Vidal's CEO overnight. Suddenly everyone wanted something from me. Business partners, charities, women. No one saw me as just Luca anymore. So you started riding the bus. I needed to feel normal again," Luca admitted. "And then I met you, and for the first time, in years someone was seeing me for me. Not for my name or my bank account." He reached across the table. "I should have told you sooner. I was just afraid of losing that." Clara didn't take his hand. "I'm not sure what to think, Luca. Part of me understands why you kept it secret, but another part feels like our whole relationship started with a lie." "It wasn't a lie," Luca insisted. "Everything I shared with you about myself, my love of books, my writing, my feelings for you, that was all real. The only thing I didn't tell you was about my financial situation." "That's a pretty big thing to omit," Clara pointed out. "I know," Luca acknowledged, "and I'm sorry, but I'm being completely honest now. No more secrets." Clara studied his face, wanting to believe him. "You said you had family obligations that pulled you away from literature. That was taking over your father's company." Luca nodded. "My father had groomed me to take over since I was a teenager. When he died, there was no question about what I was expected to do." His expression darkened. "The irony is, he never thought I was good enough, never thought I had what it took to run his precious company." "What do you mean?" "My father was a tough man," Luca explained. "Nothing was ever good enough for him. Not my grades, not my ideas, certainly not my interest in literature. He wanted a son who was exactly like him, ruthless, focused only on profit." Clara could hear the pain in his voice, and despite her lingering anger, she felt her heart soften. "And that's not who you are." "No," Luca agreed. "It's not. After he died, I tried to be that person for a while. Threw myself into the business, made the deals he would have made. But it was killing me, Clara. I was becoming someone I hated." "So, what changed?" "About a year ago, I was at this charity gala. Everyone there was just like my father, wealthy, concerned only with appearances. I remember standing in that ballroom, surrounded by people, and feeling completely alone." Luca's eyes met hers. "The next morning, I took the bus for the first time since college, and slowly I started to remember who I really was." Clara was quiet for a moment, absorbing his words. "And who is that? Who is the real Luca Vidal?" "I'm still figuring that out," Luca said with a small smile. "But I know he's someone who loves books more than boardrooms. Someone who wants to use his father's company to help people, not just make money. And someone who fell for a strong, talented woman who sees right through him." Despite herself, Clara felt a smile tugging at her lips. "You're good with words, for someone who claims to need an editor." "I never said I needed an editor," Luca replied. "I said I wanted you to be my editor. There's a difference." Their eyes met, and for a moment the tension between them eased. Then Clara's phone rang, breaking the spell. She checked the screen. "Marco again." "I should take this," she said, standing up. "Of course." Clara stepped outside to answer. "Marco, everything okay?" "Not really," her brother replied, his voice tight with tension. "Remember that loan I took out? Well, they're saying the interest rate is even higher than I thought. I don't know what to do, Clara." Clara closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle back on her shoulders. "How much higher?" Marco told her, and Clara felt sick. The rate was predatory, almost certainly illegal. "I'll figure something out," she promised, though she had no idea what. When she returned to the table, Luca immediately sensed her distress. "What's wrong?" For a moment, Clara considered keeping her problems to herself. But hadn't she just been upset with Luca for not being fully honest? "It's my brother," she explained. "He took out a loan for his tuition, and the interest rate is even worse than he thought." "How bad?" Luca asked. Clara told him, and Luca's expression darkened. "That's not just high, Clara, that's illegal. Who's the lender?" "Some company called EduFirst Financing." Marco was desperate, and they were the only ones who would approve him without a co-signer. Luca pulled out his phone and made a quick search. EduFirst is a subsidiary of Lancaster Financial. They've been investigated multiple times for predatory lending practices, especially targeting college students. Clara looked at him in surprise. "How do you know that?" "Part of my job," Luca explained, "knowing who the players are in various markets." He hesitated. "Clara, I could help with this. My company has lawyers who could—" "No," Clara interrupted firmly. "I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept that kind of help." "Why not?" Luca seemed genuinely confused. "Because—" Clara struggled to articulate the tangle of emotions inside her. "Because I've spent my whole life taking care of myself and Marco. I can't just start depending on someone else, especially someone I'm—" "Someone you're what?" Luca prompted gently when she trailed. "Half someone I'm having feelings for," Clara admitted quietly. "It would complicate things." Luca's expression softened. "It's not a weakness to accept help, Clara," says the billionaire who never has to ask for it. Clara shot back, then immediately regretted her harshness. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair." "No." "You're right," Luca said. "I've never had to worry about money, but I have had to ask for help in other ways. After my father died, I was lost. If Eleanor hadn't stepped in, guided me through those first months, I probably would have run the company into the ground." Clara hadn't considered that Luca might understand struggle in his own way. "The point is," Luca continued, "everyone needs help sometimes. Letting someone support you doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human." His words resonated with Clara, challenging beliefs she had held since childhood. Ever since her father had abandoned them, she had been determined never to depend on anyone. Even after her mother got sick, Clara had insisted on handling everything herself. But was that strength or was it just fear? "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I need to try to handle this myself first." Luca nodded, respecting her decision. "Fair enough, but the offer stands if you change your mind." As they left the cafe, Clara found herself reluctantly impressed by the glimpse into Luca's world. He wasn't just a wealthy heir playing at being normal. He seemed genuinely committed to using his position to make a difference. "Thank you for showing me all this," she said as they walked back to his car. "Thank you for giving me the chance," Luca replied. "Do you need a ride home?" Clara shook her head. "No, I need to get to work. The coffee shop." "Right," Luca said, looking disappointed. "Will I see you tomorrow on the 6:42? Clara hesitated. She was still processing everything she had learned, still unsure if she could fully trust Luca after his deception, but she couldn't deny the connection between them, stronger now than ever. "I'll be there," she said finally. Luca smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "I'll save you a seat." For the next week, Clara and Luca settled back into their routine on the 6:42 bus. But now the dynamic had shifted. Luca no longer hid his identity, and Clara found herself learning more about the complexities of his world. He would mention board meetings or development projects, sharing the frustrations of trying to change his father's company from within. In turn, Clara opened up more about her own struggles, her tutoring business, which was slowly growing, and her worries about Marco's loan situation. One evening, after her coffee shop shift, Clara found Luca waiting outside. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. I thought you might want some company on the ride home, he said with a smile. Unless you'd rather I leave? Clara shook her head. No, I'm glad to see you. They walked to the bus stop together, their hands brushing occasionally until Clara finally took his in hers. It felt strange knowing that the man in the simple hoodie beside her could have been driven home in a luxury car, but she was beginning to see that the Luca who rode the bus with her was more authentic than the CEO in the penthouse office. How was work? He asked as they waited. Busy, Clara replied, but good. I got 2 new tutoring clients today, both college freshmen needing help with literature papers. That's great, Luca said, genuinely pleased for her. Your business is growing, Clara nodded. Slowly. But it's not enough to help Marco with that. Loan? Luca was quiet for a moment. Have you considered letting me look into it? Not paying it off, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just having my legal team review the terms. If it's as predatory as it sounds, there might be grounds to challenge it. Clara had been thinking about his offer all week. Her pride still resisted, but her practical side knew it would be foolish to turn down help that could save her brother from years of crushing debt. Okay, she said finally, but just a review. Nothing more without discussing it first. Of course, Luca agreed. I'll have someone look at it tomorrow. As the bus arrived, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Maybe accepting help wasn't surrendering her independence, but simply acknowledging that some burdens were too heavy to carry alone. They found seats at the back of the bus, and as it pulled away from the curb, Luca took her hand again. I've been thinking, he said. Remember when you told me about your dream to write? Clara nodded. What about it? I think you should pursue it, Luca said. Not someday, not when life gets easier. Now, Luca, I barely have time to sleep between the coffee shop and tutoring. What if you had more time? He asked. What if you could cut back your hours at the coffee shop? Clara tensed. We've talked about this. I'm not taking your money. That's not what I'm suggesting, Luca said quickly. Vidal Enterprises has a non-profit foundation. My mother started it years ago. We run several community programs, including a writing workshop for aspiring authors. We need instructors. Clara blinked in surprise. You want me to teach writing? You'd be perfect for it, Luca insisted. You have editorial experience, you're a natural teacher, and you love literature. The position pays well and the hours would be more flexible than the coffee shop. I don't know, Clara said hesitantly. It feels like you're creating a job for me. I'm not, Luca promised. The position exists. Elena mentioned it was open last week and I immediately thought of you. But I didn't say anything because I was worried you'd react exactly like this. He squeezed her hand. It's not charity, Clara. It's an opportunity you're qualified for. Clara had to admit the idea was appealing. Teaching writing would be far more fulfilling than making lattes, and if it paid better, I'll think about it, she said finally. Luca smiled. That's all I ask. When they reached her stop, Luca got off with her. Mind if I walk you home? I'd like that, Clara replied. As they walked the few blocks to her apartment, Clara found herself imagining a future where she could actually pursue her dreams instead of just surviving. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. At her door, Luca pulled her close, kissing her gently. Good night, Clara. Good night, she whispered against his lips. She watched him walk away, this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly on the 6:42 bus. Despite her lingering reservations, Clara couldn't deny the truth any longer. She was falling in love with Luca Vidal. The next morning, Clara was awoken by an urgent call from Marco. Clara, you won't believe what happened, he said, his voice a mixture of confusion and relief. I just got an email from EduFirst. They're cancelling my loan. Clara sat up in bed, instantly alert. What? Why? They say there was an issue with the paperwork or something. All I know is the loan is gone. No debt, no interest, nothing. That's amazing, Clara said, though suspicion was already forming in her mind. But what about your tuition? That's the craziest part, Marco continued. I got a letter from the college financial aid office. Apparently I've been awarded a scholarship that will cover the rest of my tuition. Full ride, Clara. A scholarship? From where? The Maria Vidal Foundation, Marco said. I've never even heard of it. Clara's heart sank. Maria, Luca's mother's name. She closed her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and betrayal washing over her. Luca had promised not to do anything without discussing it with her first. That's wonderful, Marco, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm so happy for you. After hanging up, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, emotions warring within her. On one hand, her brother was free from a predatory loan, his education secured. On the other, Luca had gone behind her back, using his wealth to solve her problems without her consent. By the time she reached the bus stop, Clara's initial gratitude had hardened into anger. When the 642 pulled up, and she saw Luca waiting in their usual seat, she almost didn't board, but she needed answers. Morning, Luca greeted her with a smile that faltered when he saw her expression. What's wrong? The Maria Vidal Foundation, Clara said stiffly. That's your mother's name, isn't it? Luca's face fell. Clara, I can explain. You promised you wouldn't do anything without talking to me first, she interrupted. Was that a lie, too? No, Luca said quickly. I kept my word. I only had our legal team review the loan documents. Then how do you explain my brother's loan being cancelled and a mysterious full scholarship appearing from a foundation with your mother's name? Luca looked genuinely confused. Clara, I swear, I didn't do that. Yes, the Maria Vidal Foundation is my mother's charity, but I didn't arrange any scholarship for Marco. Do you expect me to believe that's a coincidence? Clara demanded. Other passengers were beginning to look their way, but Clara didn't care. It wasn't me, Luca insisted. Then understanding dawned on his face. But I think I know who it was. Who? Eleanor, Luca said. She must have overheard us talking about Marco's situation. She's on the board of my mother's foundation. Clara shook her head in disbelief. So your assistant took it upon herself to pay off my brother's loan and give him a full scholarship. It sounds like something she would do, Luca said ruefully. Eleanor was very close to my mother. She takes the foundation's mission seriously. And what mission is that? Charity cases like us? Luca flinched at her words. That's not fair, Clara. The foundation supports educational opportunities for promising students. If Elena selected Marco, it's because he deserves it. Clara wanted to stay angry, but confusion was setting in. If Luca was telling the truth and he hadn't orchestrated this, I need to think, she said, standing up as the bus approached the next stop. I'm getting off here. Clara, please. Luca reached for her arm, but she pulled away. I need space, Luca. As she stepped off the bus and watched it pull away, Clara saw Luca's face through the window, a mixture of confusion and hurt that mirrored her own feelings. She had no idea where to go from here. Every time she thought she understood Luca and the world he inhabited, something new upended her perception. One thing was clear, though. Whether Luca had arranged it or not, her brother was now connected to the Vidal family through this scholarship. Their worlds were colliding in ways Clara had never anticipated when she first sat down next to a kind stranger on the 642 bus. Clara spent the day in a fog, going through the motions at the coffee shop while her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. By closing time, she had made a decision. She needed to speak with Elena directly. Using the business card Luca had given her, Clara called his office. Vidal Enterprises, Mr. Vidal's office, Elena's crisp voice answered. Elena, this is Clara Menezes. I need to speak with you. There was a pause. Ah, Clara, yes, I was wondering when I might hear from you. 30 minutes later, Clara sat across from Elena in a quiet corner of an upscale hotel lobby bar. The older woman was as elegant as Clara remembered, with her perfectly styled silver hair and tailored suit. Thank you for meeting me, Clara began, unsure how to approach the subject. I assume this is about your brother's scholarship, Elena said directly. Clara nodded. Luca says he didn't arrange it. He didn't, Elena confirmed. That was my doing. Why? Clara asked. You don't even know us. Elena took a sip of her tea before answering. I've known Luca since he was a child. For the past 3 years, I've watched him retreat further and further into himself, crushed under the weight of his father's legacy. Her eyes met Clara's. Until he met you. Clara blinked in surprise. Me? Yes, you, Eleanor said with a small smile. For the first time since his mother died, Luca seems alive again, happy even. Do you have any idea how remarkable that is? I still don't understand what that has to do with my brother's scholarship. Eleanor sighed. The Maria Vidal Foundation was created to honor Luca's mother's memory. She believed in helping promising young people pursue their education without the burden of financial hardship. She set down her cup. When I overheard Luca discussing your brother's situation, I did some research. Marco has an impressive academic record despite significant personal challenges. He's exactly the kind of student the foundation was created to support. So it wasn't because of me, because of my relationship with Luca. Did that connection bring Marco to my attention? Yes, Elena admitted, but the scholarship was awarded on his own merits. I wouldn't dishonor Maria's memory by doing otherwise. Clara sat back, absorbing this information. And the loan? That mysteriously disappeared too. Elena's expression hardened. EduFirst is a predatory lender that has been on our legal team's radar for some time. When we examined your brother's loan documents, we found multiple violations. They have consumer protection laws. A simple letter from our attorneys was all it took to make them back down. Why didn't you tell Luca what you were doing? Because I knew he would tell you, and I suspected you might refuse the help out of pride. Elena's direct gaze made Clara uncomfortable. Was I wrong? Clara couldn't deny it. No, she admitted. I probably would have. That's what I thought, Elena said with a slight smile. Clara, may I speak frankly? Please do. I've watched Luca struggle with his father's legacy for years. Roberto Vidal was a brilliant businessman, but a terrible father. He taught Luca that vulnerability was weakness, that connections were only valuable if they benefited the bottom line. Elena's voice softened. Luca is nothing like his father. Thank God, he has his mother's heart, but he's been so afraid of becoming Roberto that he's been hiding from his own life. Clara thought about the quiet man she'd met on the bus, offering a tissue to a crying stranger. Then you came along, Elena continued, this fierce, independent woman who saw him, really saw him, not as a Vidal, but as Luca. Do you have any idea what a gift that is? I don't know what you want from me, Clara said, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I don't want anything from you, Eleanor replied. I just want you to understand something. Luca's wealth isn't who he is. It's just a circumstance of his birth, just as your lack of wealth isn't who you are. Clara felt as if Elena had seen straight through to her deepest insecurity. It's not that simple. No, it's not, Elena agreed. Money complicates everything, but at the core, this is about two people who have found something real in a world full of artifice. She leaned forward. Don't let pride rob you of that, Clara. It's too rare to throw away. As Clara left the hotel, Eleanor's words echoed in her mind. Was her independence really about strength, or was it just another form of fear? Fear of trusting, fear of being vulnerable, fear of needing someone else? The sun was setting as Clara walked, casting long shadows across the city streets. She found herself heading toward the bus stop, not for transportation, but because it had become a place of significance, the place where she had first met Luca. As she sat on the empty bench, Clara pulled out her phone and found herself scrolling. To a photo she had taken weeks ago, Luca laughing at something she had said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, his expression open and unguarded. That was the real Luca, she realized. Not the CEO in the glass tower, not the heir to a fortune, but the man who had seen her crying and offered a simple kindness. With sudden clarity, Clara knew what she needed to do. She dialed Luca's number. Clara, he answered immediately, hope and uncertainty in his voice. Can you meet me, she asked. At our bus stop. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Luca promised. As Clara waited, watching the city lights come on around her, she felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next, she was done letting fear dictate her choices. The 6:42 bus had brought them together once. Now it was up to them to decide where the journey would lead. The evening air had cooled by the time Luca arrived at the bus stop. He spotted Clara sitting alone on the bench, her face illuminated by the glow of the street lamps. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, neither spoke. "Thank you for coming," Clara said finally. Luca sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Of course, Clara, about Marco's scholarship—" "I know it wasn't you," she interrupted. "I talked to Eleanor." Luca looked surprised. "You did?" Clara nodded. "She explained everything. The foundation, the scholarship, the loan." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about her involvement sooner," Luca said. "I didn't know until you mentioned it this morning, and then you left before I could explain." "I know," Clara acknowledged. "I should have given you a chance to explain." She turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking a lot today about why I reacted the way I did. And I think—" Clara chose her words carefully. "I think I've spent so long taking care of myself and Marco that I don't know how to let anyone else help. My father left when I was 10, and after that it was just me, Marco, and Mom. And when she got sick, it became my responsibility to hold everything together." Luca listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. "I convinced myself that needing help made me weak," Clara continued. "That depending on anyone else meant setting myself up for disappointment. But today Elena said something that made me think, what was that? She said I shouldn't let pride rob me of something real." Clara took a deep breath. "And what I feel for you, Luca, it's real. Probably the most real thing I've felt in a long time." Luca's expression softened. "I feel the same way, Clara." "But I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just because you kept your wealth a secret, but because of what it means for us. We come from different worlds, Luca. No matter how much we connect on the 642 bus, that reality doesn't change." "Do our backgrounds really matter that much?" Luca asked. "We share the same values, the same passions. Isn't that more important?" "In an ideal world, maybe," Clara said. "But we don't live in an ideal world. We live in this one where people will always see the heir to the Vidal fortune and the coffee shop girl who rides the bus." Luca took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I don't care what people see or think. I care about you, Clara. The woman who reads manuscripts with a critical eye, who sacrifices everything for her brother, who's brave enough to start over when life knocks her down." His words warmed something inside her, but Clara's practical side wasn't easily silenced. "It's not just about what people think, it's about how we live. You have a penthouse and a driver, Luca. I have a one-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet. Those are just places, Clara, things. They don't define us. But they shape us," Clara insisted. "Your life experiences are nothing like mine." "That's true," Luca acknowledged. "I've never had to worry about money, but I've worried about other things, living up to impossible expectations, finding meaning in a life that was mapped out for me before I was born, wondering if anyone would ever see me, not just my bank account." He shifted closer to her on the bench. "Maybe our struggles have been different, but we've both been searching for something authentic. And I found that with you, on this bus route." Clara felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm afraid, Luca, afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize that the novelty of dating someone like me has worn off, that you'll want someone who fits into your world naturally." "That will never happen," Luca said firmly, "because I don't want to live in that world anymore. Not the way my father did." He squeezed her hand. "Remember the Rivera Commons project I showed you? That's the future I want to build, one where wealth creates opportunity instead of division. And I want to build it with you, Clara." A bus pulled up to the stop, not the 642, but a different route. The doors opened, but neither Clara nor Luca moved to board. The driver gave them a curious look before closing the doors and continuing on his route. "What would that even look like?" Clara asked after the bus had gone. "Us together. However we want it to look," Luca replied. "I'm not asking you to move into my penthouse or change who you are. I'm just asking for a chance to see where this goes, without the barriers of class or money getting in the way." His sincerity was impossible to doubt, and Clara felt her resistance weakening. "I need to know one thing first. Anything. If we do this, really do this, no more secrets, no more half-truths, complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." "I promise," Luca said without hesitation. "No more secrets." Clara studied his face searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was hope and a vulnerability that matched her own. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay," Luca repeated, a smile beginning to form. "Let's see where this goes." Luca's smile widened, relief and joy, spreading across his features. He leaned forward, and Clara met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Clara found herself laughing softly. "What's so funny?" Luca asked, his arm now wrapped comfortably around her shoulders. "Just thinking about how we met," Clara replied. "If I hadn't lost my job that day, if I hadn't been crying on that particular bus, if I hadn't decided to ride the 642 instead of taking the car," Luca added. "Do you think it was fate?" Clara asked, only half joking. Luca considered the question seriously. "I don't know about fate, but I do know that sometimes life's biggest setbacks lead to its greatest gifts." He kissed her forehead. "Losing your job brought you to me. My father's death forced me to reevaluate my life. Maybe we needed those losses to find something better." As they sat together at the bus stop where their story had begun, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The future was still uncertain, the challenges of bridging their different worlds still real, but for the first time she wasn't facing those uncertainties alone. 3 months later, Clara sat at her desk in a bright classroom, reviewing student submissions for the Vidal Foundation's writing workshop. Her position as program coordinator had started 6 weeks ago, and already the work felt more fulfilling than anything she had done at Patterson Publishing. She still had occasional doubts about whether she had earned the position on her own merits, but the enthusiastic response from her students, mostly working-class adults pursuing creative writing in their spare time, had quieted those concerns. This was work she was born to do, regardless of how she had found it. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Luca leaning against the doorframe, dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. "Ready for lunch?" he asked. Clara smiled. "Just finishing up these last few comments." Their relationship had deepened over the past months, finding a rhythm that respected both their worlds. Clara still lived in her apartment, still took the bus most days, though now by choice rather than necessity, and still maintained her fierce independence. But she had also learned to accept that receiving help, whether from Luca or others, didn't diminish her strength. For his part, Luca had found a new purpose in reshaping his father's company. The Rivera luxury development had been permanently shelved, replaced by more affordable housing projects throughout the city. The board members weren't always happy with his decisions, but Luca had discovered a confidence in his vision that made him a more effective leader than his father had ever been. "How's Marco doing?" Luca asked as they walked to a small cafe near the Foundation's community center. "Thriving," Clara replied with pride. "He's talking about graduate school now. Can you believe it? The first in our family to even consider." "Yes, I can believe it," Luca said. "He has your determination." As they settled at a table by the window, Clara noticed Luca seemed slightly nervous, fidgeting with his napkin in a way that was uncharacteristic. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," Luca said quickly. "Just thinking about something Elena mentioned this morning." "Oh?" Clara had grown fond of Elena over the months, appreciating the older woman's no-nonsense wisdom and subtle matchmaking efforts. "She reminded me that my lease on the penthouse is up next month," Luca explained. "I've been thinking about making a change." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What kind of change?" "I'm tired of living in my father's shadow," Luca said. "The penthouse, the office, even the company name, it's all his legacy, not mine. So what are you thinking?" "I found a brownstone in a nice neighborhood not far from here. It needs some work, but it has character, history. It feels like somewhere I could actually call home, not just a place to sleep." Clara could hear the excitement in his voice. "It sounds perfect for you." "For us," Luca said, then immediately looked uncertain. "I mean, not that I'm asking you to move in right away. I know we agreed to take things slowly. But maybe someday—" Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "Someday sounds nice." The relief on Luca's face made her heart swell. After all his wealth and status, what mattered most to him was her opinion, her presence in his life. "There's something else," Luca continued, reaching into his pocket. I've been carrying this around for a week now, waiting for the right moment. He placed a small, worn notebook on the table, a familiar one with a faded blue cover that Clara recognized immediately. "My writing journal," she said in surprise. "Where did you find it? I thought I lost it weeks ago." "It fell out of your bag on the bus," Luca explained. "I picked it up, meaning to return it right away, but then—" He looked slightly embarrassed. "I read it. Your stories, your ideas. Clara, they're amazing." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "They're just rough drafts, nothing special." "They're beautiful," Luca insisted, "especially the one about the woman who finds her voice through letters never sent." He opened the notebook to the last page, where a folded paper had been inserted. "I wrote you something too." Clara unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. It was a letter, written in Luca's neat handwriting. "Dear Clara, when we met on the 6:42 bus, I was a man searching for something real in a world of illusions. You were a woman bearing the weight of responsibilities few could understand. Neither of us was looking for love. Perhaps that's why we found it. You once told me that people like us, you with your burdens, me with my privilege, weren't meant for love stories, that the real world doesn't work that way. But I think you were wrong. I think love finds us exactly when we need it most, often disguised as a simple act of kindness, a tissue offered to a crying stranger, a seat saved on a crowded bus. You said love wasn't for people like us. But I think it's only ever been. Is it too late to change your mind?" Always, Luca. Clara looked up from the letter, tears threatening to spill over. "You remembered every word," Luca confirmed softly. "Clara, I know our story isn't conventional. We come from different worlds, face different challenges. But these past months have shown me that those differences don't have to divide us. They can strengthen us." He reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "I'm not asking for forever right now. I'm just asking if you believe, like I do, that this is worth fighting for. That we're worth fighting for." Clara thought about the woman she had been on that grey Tuesday morning, crying alone on the 6:42 bus, convinced that her dreams were slipping away. She thought about the man beside her now, who had seen her at her lowest and still believed in her strength, who had opened not just his world to her, but his heart. "It's not too late," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I was wrong that day. Love isn't just for other people, it's for us too." Luca's smile was radiant. "So what happens next?" Clara squeezed his hands. "I don't know exactly, but I think it starts with both of us being brave enough to build something new, something that isn't defined by your father's legacy or my past struggles, something that's just ours." "I like the sound of that," Luca said. As they sat in the sunlit cafe, hands intertwined across the table, Clara felt a sense of possibility opening before her. There would still be challenges, still be moments when their different backgrounds created friction, but they had found something rare and precious on that ordinary bus route, a connection that transcended circumstance, a love built on seeing each other clearly. And that, Clara realized, was worth any struggle they might face. 1 year later, Clara stood in the courtyard of the newly completed Rivera Commons, watching as families received keys to their new homes. The affordable housing project had been Luca's vision, but she had contributed too, helping design community spaces that included a library and writing center for residents. Luca joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful," Clara said honestly. "You should be proud." "We should be proud," Luca corrected gently. "This wouldn't have happened without you." Clara had moved into Luca's renovated brownstone 6 months ago, after Marco had graduated and moved into his own apartment near the university where he was now pursuing a master's degree. Their home had become a blend of both their worlds, Clara's beloved books filling the built-in shelves, Luca's simple but elegant taste reflected in the furnishings. They still rode the 6:42 bus together most mornings, despite the fact that Luca's driver, David, was always available. It had become a tradition, a reminder of where they had begun. "I have something for you," Luca said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box. Clara's breath caught. "Luca." "It's not what you think," he said with a smile, opening the box to reveal a key. "It's for the writing studio I had built in the back garden. I thought you might need a space of your own to finish your novel. Clara took the key, touched by his thoughtfulness. Her writing had flourished over the past year, her novel growing from the snippets in her blue notebook into a full manuscript that was now being considered by several publishers. "Thank you," she said, kissing him softly. "It's perfect." As they watched more families receive their keys, Elena approached them, elegant as always in her tailored suit. "Congratulations, both of you," she said. "Maria would have been so proud to see this day." "Thank you, Elena," Luca replied, "for everything." Elena nodded, understanding all that remained unspoken between them without her intervention a year ago. Who knew if Clara and Luca would have found their way to this moment? Later that evening, as Clara and Luca walked home together, a light spring rain began to fall. Luca pulled out an umbrella, sheltering them both as they continued their stroll. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if we hadn't met that day on the bus?" Clara asked. Luca considered the question. "I'd probably still be living in my father's shadow, running his company the way he would have wanted, empty inside. And I'd still be struggling to make ends meet, putting my dreams on hold indefinitely," Clara added. "So I guess we saved each other," Luca said, squeezing her hand. As they reached their brownstone, Clara paused on the steps, turning to face Luca. "You know, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." "What's that?" "That first day on the bus, why did you sit next to me? There were other empty seats." Luca smiled, remembering. "You looked like you needed someone to see you, really see you. And somehow, I knew you might see me too." Clara reached up to touch his face, still amazed that this man, who could have had anyone, who could have lived any life he chose, had chosen her, had chosen them. "I love you, Luca Vidal," she said simply. "I love you too, Clara Menezes," he replied. From the 6:42 bus and beyond. As they stood together in the gentle rain, Clara thought about the long journey that had brought them here, from a chance meeting between strangers to a love that had transformed them both. Their story wasn't perfect or easy, but it was theirs, built on honesty, respect, and the courage to bridge worlds that others might have kept apart. And in the end, isn't that what love is? Not a fairy tale without obstacles, but a choice to face those obstacles together, to see each other clearly even when the path forward isn't certain, to believe that what connects us is stronger than what divides us. For Clara and Luca, that connection had begun with a simple gesture, a tissue offered to a crying woman on the 6:42 bus, and it had grown into something neither could have imagined on that grey Tuesday morning when their worlds first collided. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the most ordinary moments. You just have to be brave enough to stay on the bus and see where the journey leads. The end.